Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for the Vault, and this time for the Vault, yes, I am covering Action Comics #1, the Facsimile edition, and I must admit, this was really worth picking up and enjoying, and I would also recommend that you also pick it up for yourself. Now, overall in story totals, alright, in this I will be covering 8 stories. Even though there is, I think, about 10 overall, I will only be covering 8, so the other 2 you'll have to go and pick this up for yourself to work out what they are and see what they are. So I'll jump into the first one and I'll be giving my rating for both the story and the art. For the cover rating, definitely a 10 out of 10 because we get exactly what we see here. So now it's time to start going into the first appearance of Superman. So as our story starts, we of course get our introductory that Superman is from a distant planet, of course, who he's taken in by, plus some of the feats that happen here, until eventually he decides to become Superman. The story definitely progresses. Of course, he gets fired upon, puts a man in his place, moves into another area. The story continues. We finally get to see what's happening on the Kent side of things when he's being Clark, and of course returning back to Superman. The story continues. He catches the big bad, and of course the picture we see on the cover, to the things that happen and who he meets, and returning back to practically the Daily Planet. We practically move on to the next set of stories within the story until we eventually reach the end. Well, for this one, I gave the first story, being the one on Superman, an 8, the art for its time, an 8 out of 10. So time to move into the next one, story 2. As we can see here, a lot of black and white being used in relation to the character, who we know as Chuck Dawson. And of course this is set a lot in the Wild West. Story continues. Of course a fight breaks out. And it ends. So for the story, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. For the art, an 8 out of 10 for its time. So, moving into the next one, and we get Zatara, the Master Magician. And to those who have heard of Zatara, he is also meant to be the father of Zatanna. And this is some of his early story. Really good story of what's here. But I'm sure some people would somewhat question the art. Things progress. You get a little bit further. Escapes his binds. Moving a little bit further. Starting to approach the end. And for this story, I gave it a 7 out of 10, and an 8 out of 10 for the story, and a 7.5 for the art. Now it's time to move to the next story. As we advance to the next story, we have Sticky Mitt Simpson, And for this story, I gave, I think, a 7 out of 10 for the story and 7 for the art. Now it's time to move on to story 5. Moving on to the character of Marco Polo. Story advances. And left to be continued, to which I give it a 7 out of 10 for both art and story. Moving on to Pet Morgan, who's a boxer. And we advance further. Alright, to which I gave the story rating in this a 7 out of 10 and the art a 7 out of 10. Now there's just 2 more stories I need to cover. Scoop Scanlon, the 5-star reporter. Must admit, this was a very interesting story. I wonder if this character will actually return to DC Comics or even Action Comics. Story advances, and that's the end. For it being in black and white, I didn't mind it that much, to which I gave the story a 7.5 out of 10 along with the art a 7.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move on to the last story. And the Adventures of Tex Thompson. As we see the story here, it's somewhat a type of love interest. Story starts to move to conclusion as we get further. Finally goes up against his big bad. And she comes with a gun. And finally, really moving towards the end of the story. And as we finally hit the end, we finish off. For this story, I gave a 7.5 out of 10, and for the art, a 7 out of 10. So, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. I hope you enjoyed me covering the Action Comics issue number 1, which came out in 1938 in this Facsimile edition. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day. And by the way, I do recommend that you pick this up. It's worth picking up.